All right. So of course I have to whatever. So thanks for being here. I know today it is the eve of election day. And so election day is kind of a big deal. And it doesn't happen that often. And it certainly doesn't happen at the impact that I think most of us feel uh, this election has. So, like, obviously, whether you're Democrat or Republican, like, there's a lot going on if you're choosing or if you live in America. Like November 6th is a big deal. And so um, I am taking my time and moving away from what I typically do. I typically talk about Catholic stuff. But today it's just too much of a draw to actually address some interesting aspects of what's happening today. Um, Now, it's the thumbnail, I think, kind of, let's see, November the 5th is the day everything should have changed. All right. So, I don't quite know what you mean by that. So, but I'll keep going. If you want to explain that, that'd be nice. But uh, obviously, we don't live in the UK, so I know that November 5th would have had a big impact if Guy Fawkes did what he did. Oh, got it. Yeah, okay. So yeah, it is exactly that. Yeah, a Guy Fawkes joke. Okay, but the biggest problem I think we have is whether you're Democrat or Republican, that you really don't know what's going to happen on the 6th. Like you are like legitimately concerned from the Republican standpoint. You Kamala Harris has this viewpoint or has this image of there probably isn't going to be an election, right? Like there's a serious concern about whether or not fair elections will continue to happen without some important aspects coming about, making it a one party system. And then on the other side, Democrats, they're saying that Trump's going to be a dictator and he's going to make it so he just keeps ruling for the next, however many years he has left. I think he's 78. So like that's not, that's probably not going to be a long time. But if that worst case scenario on the Democratic side happens, um, indeed, remember the 5th of November. Um, so we're not advocating violence. So just to clarify, these are jokes. Because if you know about the Guy Fawkes history, but but this is like an important and concerning issue that people have on November 6th. And so like when you're watching tomorrow and the battleground state, one of which I live in Michigan. Um, if that stops counting again, like what's going to run through your head? Well, it probably depends entirely on who's winning at that point, because there's going to be some states who have their crap in order, and they're going to be like, all right, well, it's red, it's blue, whatever. Like it's like most most Western civilizations are able to count a state's worth of people within a day, um, without the use of sophisticated software, which ironically enough, my state came out, like I'm pretty sure it was my Secretary of State came out recently talking about the Dominion voting system being potentially compromised or in a state of flux that is not robust for what we're about to do. And coming out a week before the election is kind of like a big deal for people. Um, so uh, this idea of like everything looks like it did in like 2000 or 2004. um I grew up, that's when I was going to high school, so like 2000, 2004. I'm sorry, 2004, not 2000, but whatever. I was in 6th grade in 2000. But the idea that this is going to be like then, like it's just, we don't have the confidence in our voting system. And so, all right, so I'm saying all this stuff. Like, what does it matter? Like, why are you saying this? Well, I think saying the elephant in the room is important. I think it's important to recognize both sides have an issue with this election. It isn't just Republicans, and in my opinion, I think Republicans have a more evidenced like a more evidenced uh, position than the Democrats, given that we've already had 4 years of a republic, of Trump, and the media is trying to censor people like that's happening. So like the evidence just simply doesn't really support the Democratic side, but it certainly does support the Republican side. So obviously, where I line up on this issue, but still, I'm recognizing, as someone on that side recognizes the other side sees it in a very similar light. And right now, I think it's really important that we keep our heads together, because it's very easy for this to make it go really bad, like regardless of who it is, um uh regardless of who wins, like something bad can happen. Like Republicans will point out, all right, well, riots will happen if Trump wins. Like basically what happened in 2020, it'll just happen all over the place. Somebody will like put money together or something, and then on the Democratic side, it's well, a January 6th is going to happen. So like we have a lot of like parallels, and I think it'd be silly to not recognize those things. And so for the people who are um, may not be in the minutia of what's going on, I think basically this just needs to be said, that there's a recognition that on both sides we have this issue, and that like at the end of the day, like we're citizens, and for the most part we have goodwill towards what we're actually trying to vote for, not that we're both trying to like not that we're enemies. Like we can be political enemies in, I guess, in political competition, but I mean, I think enemy is still too strong of a word, but it is something that we should recognize, or else we're going to miss the humanity of the other side. So hello, Mark. Yeah, I'm doing well. You're right. Both sides have an issue with this election. Neither one wants to accept any sort of defeat. Yeah, like a lot of us have our like heels in. Yeah. So not a better, like basically what I just said. So yeah, I agree with you, Mark. Correct. Yeah, like we the second commandment is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Yeah, and that's like one of the reasons why I'm doing this, is because like we do have this understanding of like, you're not my neighbor. Like you're a Republican, you're not my neighbor. Or you're a Democrat, you're not my neighbor. Like you have red hair, blue hair, pink hair, you're not my neighbor. And it's just, no, you are. I may not like how you necessarily live, or how you vote for, or who you vote for, but that doesn't mean that we're not neighbors. Like we still very much live in an area and rely on one another. Let's see. Let's see, right. Yeah, so like folks don't know how to be complex creatures anymore. It's all us versus them, and there is no desire to work for them, whoever them is. Right. Like so like we have like I mean, I know a lot of people have talked about this, but tribalism makes a comeback. And it usually makes a comeback when, like, for example, what's happening now is we're getting too busy with our daily lives. Right? Like we got to take the kids to the 3 sports they're a part of, their instrument that they're going to learn. um, I have work that's always pushing me. There's daycare. I have to keep going from left to right, this side of the town to that side of the town. We're not taking time to actually like reflect on what's going on. We're always keeping ourselves busy, we're always keeping our children busy, and we don't, like, I'm using a very specific situation because I'm a parent, and I work, I live with other parent, or not live with other parents. My kids go to school, and I try to work with other parents to have play dates and all that fun stuff. But there's a real problem. But like I know that happens in other levels. Like if you're retirement age, like that happens to a certain extent, but not nearly as much. If you're, more mid, like on the upper level of middle age, like that happens. If you're very young, like in your 20s to 30s, like you may fill up your entire time with work because that's what you're focusing on. That's what you think is really important. And you have this, really high work ethic. But the problem is having that work ethic, having all those things going on, if it detracts you from your priorities that you should attend to, that's a real problem because then it ripples out into everything else. Like if you can't reflect on the positions of other people and why they hold them, without just thinking, oh, they're evil because they're the other people, like you have a thinking problem. Like you have a critical thinking problem. um and that doesn't mean that doesn't mean I don't like you, right? Like that's the other thing. Like any criticism is all of a sudden like you're the enemy. Like we are in an incredibly like thin glass state where everybody feels like they're on, well, I guess thin ice state, where everyone feels like they're on thin ice. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Twitter actually, even though I'll just case in point, well, I guess I'll build on it just for a little bit. But the X, for example, is really good at getting information out there, but it has also conditioned us to look at 30-second interval items and think that once we listen to it all, we know everything about it, which is incredibly naive. Or what else is there? Sorry, I'm reading the comments. Sorry. Right. Like when reality, human nature hasn't changed. Like we still expect, like we still interact with each other socially. Even if it is digitally, we still expect some sort of appreciation. When we do things for others, like gratitude makes a big deal, right? Like not yelling at people kind of matter. Like I mean, like I don't know, like it's kind of, I'm kind of thinking of like people who work at like fast food. Like can you imagine like all the DoorDash people coming in and there's just a bunch of DoorDash people and people going through drive through, but nobody's coming into to it's basically like during COVID, like nobody's doing anything to sit in and eat. Now that happens here and there, but like not to the same level. People, are very isolated. They've become islands. And so when you mix that with like X and, all this other things that basically pulls our humanity away from each other, not because we need to, but because it's where we choose to be. Like even right now, like, in a way, like I'm kind of doing that because I don't have another person I'm actively with, but I like the live stream and the way this works because I'm able to talk to you, Mark, right? Like I'm able to get immediate feedback as a human being. And even though I can't hear your voice, like your text, like I recognize you're a human person giving your thoughts and thinking about the same things I'm thinking about or responding to the same topic I'm talking about. Sorry, I'm like I don't have someone that does the comments for me. I have to do it myself. Yeah, so that is actually a big thing for me because I currently work for a corporation and I'm a statistician. And so like the idea that we like our economy seems to be like its foundation right now seems to be corporatism. And that's obviously a really big problem because I want to be self-sufficient. I don't want to be reliant on an employer. I want to be able to work like for myself, for my family, and not have an upper extreme already capped, right? Like So I work for a corporation. Like we do have a bonus, but that bonus is like also set in stone. So it's like, or let's say a loose stone because there is some wiggle room for what that could be. But like it's I can't work beyond like my salary. Like I can get promoted later, but like I can't work beyond that. Whereas like you have someone like Matt Walsh or I mean even that still technically a corporate, so that's a bad example. Never mind. I'm trying to think of like basically what ends up being the owners of people who end up making companies. So like that would probably be like Tim Pool, right? Like Tim Pool is the head of his organization. He hires people, but like these are not great examples. Like an electrician would be a better example. A freelance electrician. That's more practical. Like it depends on how many people you help, and that pay you, obviously. And so your upper limit's based on how much you're able to work. Sorry, I'm scatterbrained right now, like with that. So how dare you not how dare you not validate my relativistic worldview? You must literally be Stalin. Yeah, that's where we're at right now. He's almost there. All right, so like Mr. Papist, you can probably tell, but it's obvious they're embellishing statistics. You can revise almost every single jobs number down for 3 years and then claim the methodology is solid. Yeah, like that. Yes, like you can control for variables in such a way that it ends up you're able to basically lie with them. Which is why whenever like we have so many statistics thrown at us that like it would be awesome if we had like audits, like, and that the media was held accountable to it. But at the same time, like that creates a weird situation where it's like disinformation. So it's like you need to be able to have actual fact checkers, but that are not beholden to anybody. And it's like, unfortunately, impossible. So like it's really weird how that works. Yes. Self-employment is also better for families because you can pass that down to your sons, securing generational wealth. Right. Like as opposed to like they can use the same systems and the same tools. They can build off what's already there. Or like a friend of mine, his family owns like a funeral home, and he's become like he's a mortician. And so once his dad decides to pass it on to him, he's now going to inherit the funeral home, and he's going to apply what he's learned working in other businesses to make the funeral home more efficient and also accommodating to the people who are having funerals. So I agree with you. Yeah, that's it. I think the difference that you're looking for is that certain skills are scalable and transferable. For example, skills like electrical or medicine are scalable based on your time, right? Whereas some of them aren't. I also do think, well, I'm not going to go into that right now, but so like getting back to the point, like November 5th is going to happen. Like for us, like as soon as it becomes 8 p.m., it's like, okay, we're paying attention, 15 minutes, half hour later, we're paying attention to what's going on with the count, because that actually like it will actually start to come in. And historically, like growing up, and when I ran, well, yeah, growing up, like when the vote came in, it was pretty fast. And I think a lot of us remember when they would call it really early, when there would be like 2 or 3% of the vote coming in, which as a statistician, I still don't understand how they did that. Because of like, I understand like there's probabilistic models and there's propensity scoring and all this other crap, but like it's also like it still doesn't make sense because people have free will, and ultimately it's what the like total count is as opposed to the probability of that total account. So that's it's always got me, and it still gets me that what like growing up that's what happened. Let's see. Yeah, you absolutely did throw me off. Like I'm just completely thrown off. Let's see. Right. So, I mean, your situation doesn't exactly happen anymore. On that's very common. Um, Most people would still probably argue that you should probably get your high school diploma, but if you're already a homeowner and you have your business, like obviously, like that's there are circumstances that allow you to kind of circumvent what everybody else has to do. So, but like that's obviously not normal, like for most people. Um, let's see, mortician. So yeah, mortician, best job security ever. No cure for death, but the training is also really exclusive and expensive. In some states like Illinois, you actually need to be sponsored by a family to enter. Huh, I didn't know that. But we live in Michigan, so he doesn't. I don't think he has to deal with that. Um, I think he has to be sponsored by a funeral home. But yeah, so there's a video I ended up doing for my stats channel that dealt with the probability of being buried alive, and that's a very interesting conversation. Let's just say that. Yep, another thing, being a child of divorce sets you behind. So like when parents get divorced, they actually set the wealth of the family back 2 generations, which is super awesome for like obviously like I'm a family like I'm a child of a family that went through divorce. So like it's not cool. And uh we we basically went from like solidly middle class to like not like it really sucked growing up, and I'm laughing about it now, but that's only because I'm on camera. It wasn't great. um so but like that's the other thing. So like when coming back to the understanding of politics, is that we do have such a problem with divorce, and it isn't just minorities, because right, like minorities have like the worst, typically have the worst when it comes to divorce rates. But now like majority population also has a significant divorce rate. I forgot what it is right now, but it is not unusual. Like it's unusual that my kids have two parents that live in the house and are together and are not neither one of us are remarried. Like that is odd for my kids. Like even when we go to a Catholic school, like that's odd. Um it's not the greatest thing at all. But like that definitely warps people's minds because they have a home environment that makes things like chaotic. It makes them chaotic, and it doesn't ground them in a way they should. And especially from like what we've seen from the data like 50 years ago. And I'm not trying to glamorize what happened like 50 years ago and everything, but in terms of just following basic like decency understandings, or being able to understand the other side, like critically think and be like, oh my gosh, like you're coming at it from this angle. I understand where you're coming from. I don't hate you for voting for this person. Whereas like now, like everyone's literally Stalin or Hitler, or and pick a number of people that are just bad. That's what people say. And like that's not okay. And it does happen on the right too. Like the right does say, they'll say like, oh, they're like Hitler, um, or the Nazis, or any of these other fun words that are probably going to trigger my video. But there's also the very real problem that a lot of it coincides with the parallels leading up to the Nazi Party becoming a thing. And so if you have the history behind you, like you understand that, and you're not just going off tabloids, like that's one thing. But if you're just going off tabloids, or you're going off like another person's word, like saying that out loud is also like not okay. Um, Basically, like you got to know what you're saying in order to justify why you're saying it. And so, sorry, it's like a little bug. Sorry. The But like we haven't. It's like we like basically in the last decade and a half, like we have completely polarized, like away from each other, and we haven't seen each other as neighbors for a significant portion of time. And so when people talk about like the CW potential, like some people kind of scoff at it. They're like, "Oh, that'll never happen." I'm like, I don't know. Like that's like people can only be pushed so far, and especially if they feel like they're surrounded by enemies because the people are treating them that way. Um, like that is unfortunately a reality we have to deal with. And when you haven't had the grounding of a parent, of having a father figure in the house, and or you're raised by a mom like that, like in my case, like my mom was working for us, and she seemed to work a lot, and there were, she didn't have a lot of time to raise us. Like that's just the reality of what I went through. But it's lucky for her, I'm not like the statistical average of what happens to people who come from divorce. But like, but the uh, and I have a lot to thank to my sponsor, my confirmation sponsor for that. But the problem comes with the like just the discipline, the lack of discipline, and the readiness to just pounce, and not appreciate the person as a person. And I guess I can't stress that enough. Like everybody, like if you're open to it, watch Attack on Titan. It's an anime. Like it hits this point home in a very like grotesque way. Like it's not for everybody by any means, but it does hit the empathy point of your enemy, or your, at that point in the show it's your enemy, but in this case we're literally just talking about neighbors, yet we feel like we're enemies from each other. And I think that that's like we have to move past that. We have to move past the rhetoric, or else it's going to destroy the country. So, let's see. All right, wow, you guys are just steamrolling in the chat. Back, um, let's see. Back to the live stream topic, though. I don't think everything changes come November 6th. In fact, most of our society's problems cannot be solved by who's president. No. Like, right. Like that's correct. The problem comes with the results. Like the problem comes with we do not know how the results will increase or decrease a violent outcome in some capacity. And both sides feel like that's a potential. And so both sides are on edge. And some people don't like feel that way. Like they generally feel safe. They don't think that society is going to crumble when that happens. And I agree with you. Like I don't think most of the problems will be solved because they can't be solved by the president. It's the uncertainty of how people will react to what happens. Let's see. Okay, yeah. Love Attack on Titan. Yeah. Okay. Right. So many, if not most, Americans can't consistently or easily afford groceries. That doesn't lead to societal stability, regardless of who is in charge. You're right. If that continues to be the case, right? Like, but the problem is that okay, so there's a combination of things that happen there. The markets, if Trump wins, the markets will respond, and if they respond like they did when he got elected, he is like the markets will be better for the average individual in terms of purchasing power. Now, does that mean that have an immediate effect on groceries? Not necessarily, but it could have an immediate effect on oil, which means gas would be that. Um, everybody uses gas. Not everybody can afford a EV, right? Electrical vehicle. So this idea of like, I don't want to play down your point, because your point does make sense, because your groceries are not going to go down, right? Like they will typically stay there until like there's some sort of like massive correction that happens. But there are other things that can allow for that to, like other things outside of groceries that can have that effect by simply who's in office, because we've seen it before. Like we saw it in 2016. So yeah, that's yeah. I mean, you're not right, but you're not wrong, and I'm not right. Like complete, like it's not a complete thing. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm like putting you down. Um, uh, yeah, it was a random pick after I finished something, and he sat down to watch for a second. And that first episode, we were both like, "Holy crap!" So, yeah. um. Let's see. Either. Yeah. Okay. So, right. Like, yeah. I see your comment, Mark, but I'm trying not to like be too specific. I really am trying to focus on the like human element here, and so I guess like, let's see what else, what other, like, I do like, when it comes to the violent aspect, I do think that that is a real possibility of happening. Um, Not just on the right side, but on the left. So like, I think there is a possibility that could happen, and um, but that doesn't mean like you get, like, you promote it, right? Like you don't want to promote that. You want to like not promote that at all. You want to simmer it down, and address the realities that we have. Like for some people, if Trump gets elected, they will think the end of the world's happening. In fact, like, what was it? Google had like a whole comfort section session when Trump won the first time. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, we're adults here voting. Like, we're all adults here. We shouldn't have to have like comfort sessions for like something like that. That is just absolutely ridiculous. Um, so let's see. So either way, the first few years of policy will be a squeeze, because even if tariffs protect domestic goods and jobs, the adjustment that will be tough on the wallets at first. Yes, that's also that's true. Um, yeah, I agree with that. Um, so but at the end of the day, like when it comes to this, exactly like Mark pointed out, like we're to follow the second commandment given by Jesus, to love your neighbor, and like that's really what this is about, because the fear of uncertainty is not with the markets per se. It's the people who are elected and how the people respond to it. And so um the and like nobody's really talking about that. I mean, I actually saw Alex Jones talk about it on Twitter, like when I was paying attention. Like, he pops up in my Twitter because like some of the, like, he basically like I've noticed some things he's kind of like a, what do you call it, a canary in the coal mine situation, where he kind of like like signals off something, and then all of a sudden a few days later you'll see something very similar to what he said promoted by, like, it's kind of weird, because I don't typically watch Alex Jones, but like but like he's the only one that I've actually seen talk about what would happen um after an election and the Democrats lost, and what would, and it was about the human element, and it, ironically enough, was about the Second Amendment and the use of it by the Democrats, which was like really weird, but also not something I'm like that's far fetched either. So it kind of creates like this situation where it's like people are really talking about this. I understand Alex Jones, probably not the most sound person to cite, but nonetheless, like, this is not something you say on Twitter, right? Like, you don't say, well, I'm going to use the Second Amendment if my guy doesn't get in. Like, because then you're going to be like looked at as a suspicious character. And so, like, that's not something that's really being said, but there's a lot of people thinking it. And it's like, not like, it's kind of funny, but kind of not, because it's one of those things where it's like it's not, it's kind of funny in like a sad way, where it's like people really are on edge that this is realistically being talked about in certain circles. So yeah, like, don't go there. Like, don't, like, be of love your neighbor, don't look at them as the enemy. And that's sounding way more dire than I want it to be, but, like, again, that's kind of where we're at. Let's see. You're right, though. We need to focus on the human element. We need to build the virtue required to survive something like this, and it starts with mortifying our desires and accepting we don't need a whole bunch of stuff to be happy. See Madame Blueberry. Actually don't know who Madame Blueberry is, so I'm out of that. But you're absolutely, like, in terms of like what we think we need, like, that's the crazy thing for me is like, when you look at the way people spend their money, especially those people who complain about them not having enough money to do X, Y, and Z, like, they blow it off on like a lot of things they just don't need. Like, you don't need a $5 coffee. Like, right? Like, that's an example. But like, if you do a $5 coffee every day, like, that's a significant use of money over the course of a month and a year. So let's see. If you like to talk to, okay. VeggieTales, got it. Okay. I did not watch VeggieTales, and now I'm kind of glad I didn't. So okay, let's see. It's a special from VeggieTales about a blueberry who goes to the Stuff Mart and destroys her house with how much she packs into it, and learns the stuff won't make her happy. Yeah. Okay. I mean, like, that VeggieTales. If a squash can make you smile. Okay. I mean, like, it's funny because I actively try to prevent my kids from watching VeggieTales. So, like, I know you're using that as a reference, but like, I try to prevent them from watching it because of some of the depictions they have of biblical characters that I think is like horrendously, like, not okay. So I will take your word for it. Okay, yeah, like, my wife watched it, not me. All right, so I guess that's all I've got to say. I don't really have much to say besides basically a kind of like big long expressed version of the second commandment, to love your neighbor. So that's kind of it. I don't really have anything else. I don't have any statistics to be like, wow, these statistics are like, we're going to go into civil war if this happens. Like, this is the probability. Like, I don't even know how you would collect that data, but it's whatever. But, since we're talking about, we're in November, and that is an out of date backdrop. The that one video I did on the probability of being buried alive, like, it's not zero. So yeah, you can think about that for a while. I will try to redirect it, like, probably from my channel to another channel, because it's not going to be my statistics channel, because it's not of the same content. So my statistics channel, just a very brief explanation of this. My statistics channel, it's called Learn 2 Stats. Learn the number 2 stats. And I teach intro and intermediate statistics in videos, and they're typically like 2 to 5 minutes. But this one's like 10 minutes, and it's like kind of like a story as opposed to like a mini lecture of how to do a method or understand a principle. So and the story doesn't have a great ending. When you get to when you want to find the probability of of being buried or cremated alive. So we're going I'll redirect that some other time. And hopefully you guys don't well, I mean, I've asked my wife to leave a phone in the casket. Um, so, and I'm not getting embalmed. So that's where I'm at with that. So I'll just leave it there. Let's see. No fun stats from our battlegrounds. See, okay, so I go with like Mark with what he said earlier about the statistics. I simply don't trust the polls. Like I don't like there's so like in the state of Michigan, there are union halls that do not have Harris Waltz out front, like a sign. Okay. That is crazy to most people. Like, like that doesn't make sense to a lot of them. When you go through a lot of the neighborhoods, I live in Southeast Detroit. When you go through a lot of the neighborhoods, you very rarely see Tim Wall's sign or Harris Wall sign. You see a lot of Trump signs. Like it is overwhelmingly Trump in most of the area that we've been to when it comes to the signs. And so like most of the state is actually conservative. Like outside of Detroit and Flint and Pontiac, most of the state goes red. The fact that I live in an area that is typically deep blue, and I'm seeing all these signs, which in 2020 I saw a lot more Biden signs, like a lot more, and they were in front of union halls. Like this, like it's crazy, like what I'm seeing, and the fact that like the polls are saying, oh well, it's close. I don't like I literally don't see that, and so like there's a point where you do have to step back from statistics and be like, okay, reality does not reflect what statistics are saying. And even though I don't have a methodology behind them, like I also understand statistics. So like I know that polling data, like Mark polled, told like you can skew it where you maybe like have a certain amount of like liberal voters in your sample. You do a stratification where you're bringing in liberal voters more than you would. And so you don't have an equal split at 50-50 or 40-40-20. So the 20 being independent. So like you don't have that. And so like you create this dynamic of showing that you sampled people mostly in an appropriate way, but you had a propensity score to base your survey respondents off of that skewed the data. So like you knew so ahead of time and you kind of just took it. And so I actually think that that's what's happening in a lot of these polls, because I just don't see like I don't see this. Like I don't know, like I don't see it. The data doesn't reflect that based off other, like it's not polling data, but like other data that typically goes hand in hand with polling is not reflecting that. So and like right now, I guess the best thing we've I guess the hard evidence would be like the early voting is showing very much in favor of Trump. So which is just not usual. It's not like typically early voting goes towards Democrats, and now we're seeing it go towards Trump. Uh, yes, I know that, and he like I didn't expect him to do that. So like, yeah, it's I'm probably gonna remake that video because I say too much, and I'm gonna just literally send it out to um all the vocation priests, like for example, we have Father Craig. He's in charge of all the priests that are um going through the seminary, and so I'm probably going to send that out to them, just so even if the bishops don't um get the information from the video I send out to them, there's going to be a secondary video that's going to be like straight to the point about what influences like priests based off that data. And I think some of the analysis is kind of like it's like really crappy. Like it's like incredibly shallow. Well, last year this happened. And it's like cool. Like what's been happening the last 20 years? Like you want time data, like some sort of it's not time series, um, but it is like data over time as opposed to just one snapshot from 1 year. So like that was really weird to me that that was being promoted. And they got the analysis from this institution. I'm like, hey, I'll charge like half that money. I'll charge half the money and give you a more detailed response. Like, hey, but that's whatever. All right, that's I just thought that was weird. I do think we need more statisticians in the Catholic Church that actively work for the Catholic Church because there's so many things like by your fruits you will know them. And like if you do good statistics, like that those are like you're measuring the results of those fruits. So like it just doesn't make sense to me why we don't have more anyways. Um oh yeah, so I totally forgot to tell you that. Um, well, it's just it's greater than 0. Like that's it's greater than 0. But yeah, I'll show the video. So, in Ohio, the Steelworkers Union hasn't endorsed Harris, and so they won't campaign for her. Yeah, that's right. Because if you're against tariffs, like if you're against having tariffs, you're against the union. And it's really weird when you have the UAW president coming out and saying that the party that doesn't want tariffs is for them. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like the tariffs are there to protect domestic workers, like that and products. Like that's the point. Um, let's say every poll had their numbers close. Yep, they do. And but like that's the point though, is because like so if that's the case, from a propaganda perspective, so statistics should not ever be used as propaganda. However, if you're going to use them as propaganda, you want to give them urgency. And that's what's happening. And so I'm not surprised that they're like, oh, well, everything's within a margin of error. Like everything, like we really need you to come out and vote. Like Gretchen Whitmer came out, for example, and said, don't trust the polls. Like we need you to come out and vote. You need to not feel secure because of the polls. You need to just vote. And it's like for Republicans, that's true too. Like you shouldn't trust the polls, but at the same time, like um you shouldn't be relaxed because you see so many going your way because you can sabotage yourselves. Uh, oh, okay. So in more, okay, 300 people. All right. So like you seem to be yeah, you're very close to me. Um, I won't say it here, but yeah, you're very close to me. Uh, Harris win will lead. See, this is what makes me concerned that a Harris win will lead to everyone thinking the numbers are fake. I mean, I don't know exactly like what you mean. What's concerning about it? Like that just people think that it's fake because like you can give like the other thing about these like not only can polls be used as propaganda, but they can be used as false evidence, right? Like people will say, well, the polls indicated that this would happen, and she was always ahead, and so of course, we're not surprised that she won. Like that's how the rhetoric would go. Um, but yeah, like I still don't see how that, like, statistics aren't everything, and like that's what I don't like. And you can't study everything, especially when it comes to voting, which has, like, you're not just asking the average person. Like, the voter is the voter, and that's why they look for likely voters, but even that's not always like, that is not 100% at all. So yeah, that ends up becoming a problem. uh yep. Yeah, and that's what I meant by the stratification, is because you're stratifying based off, um like, you're splitting the group in a way that doesn't make, that will tend to lead you. See, there is some randomness still in there, but you're splitting the group in a way that it will tend to lean the way that you want it to. And so, like, that's like the huge problem. Let's see. Let's see. Oh yeah, that was a thing. So I know we're, like, off on a different topic, and um, but like, Kickstarter would not be, like, they were not okay with me doing a video for altar boy ordinations, like ordinations who, like, did altar boy stuff, because I don't know, because I satisfied everything. Like, I did everything they wanted me to do, but they, I guess, didn't want me to fundraise. Um, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of weird. Um, oh, hey, Olive. So, so yeah, that's. I mean, I know we went off to a different topic, but the, the, what is it? I Maybe I will start live streaming really freaking late, because people will get on. Because I'm noticing, like, if I do 8:30, nobody's on, but like at 9:30, like, got like hundreds of chat going on from people, and I know whatever. So, like, that's crazy to me. Um, End of the stream, off track. It's kind of your thing at this point. Yeah, I know, but like, that's, I mean, people don't, looking at the stats of my videos, like, people don't stay till the end most of the time. So it's, like, kind of weird to talk about. Um, so uh so we don't, so yeah, like, when it comes to, no, I already said that. All right, so yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. OGZ. I don't know what OGZ is. Um, okay. So I guess I'm just going to get off. Like, I don't really, um okay, I don't know what that is. I guess you'll just tell me later. But yeah, I guess I'll just get off. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the Luce me, like, live stream. Original genetics. I don't Okay, I don't know. It's still, like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know. I didn't know Veggie Tales. I didn't know a Veggie Tale reference, and now I don't know what original genetics is, and so, just, all right. But yeah, so yeah, so if you, yeah, make sure you hit at, that's a great point. All right, thank you for saving me here. Hit adoration and pray tomorrow if y'all can. Um, don't know where that y'all came from, but um it's split the trads in half based on if they like anime. Okay, so my point still stands. I have an issue with the, like, artist. Like, could have picked anybody else in the world that didn't have that background, and it would have been fine. It would have been fine, like completely fine with me. But like the fact that the original artist is like that, it just blows my mind that they did that. And yeah, there's that tribalism again. Because like what ends up happening, so the politics, so okay, the separation of church and state is probably the most ridiculous thing. The liberal, let me clarify. The liberal understanding of the separation of church and state, that is to say that the church, even through its members, should have no influence in politics. Which is to say, if a practicing Catholic says they don't like abortion because it's child murder, which it is, they shouldn't be able to do that. That is the most ridiculous thing in the world. Like politics is inherently religious, in that it applies the moral application of the religion to the society. So like it doesn't make sense to say that religion and politics are different. Like we literally use the same language. Well, what you believe, what's your platform for these issues, and what's your reasoning? And your reasoning tends to be based around some belief, right? Like so it's like, well, that's a woman's right. Well, that's a belief. Like that is not like some sort of evidence of anything. Like that's not like materialism, or like you're doing some sort of physics calculation. It is quite literally a belief. And so this idea of religion and politics being separated creates this unnecessary dynamic of, well, it's not an unnecessary dynamic, but it's a difference. And if you skew it in the way that we've skewed it, you end up having like politics becomes religion for people, right? Like the people on the left, like the diehard people on the left, I would say use the religion of or use their politics as a religion. And the diehard people on the right, in a similar way, but basically from a Protestant angle, like because Protestants, not to get, like obviously there's different Protestants because there's so many of them, but they use the Republican Party as a way of expressing their faith in a very direct and, in their understanding, faithful way. And so it, like, we see that we see the overlap. It's just the people like us in the middle need to accept that, like, if you're religious, like, you're going to have certain like axioms that you cannot go beyond, and that you got to hold down your convictions. And you do that by how you vote. And unfortunately, we live in a society that only has two realistic options. And most of that has to do with the institutionalization of those two parties being dominant at the state level. And if you don't, like, for example, I believe in Michigan, we have it where if you're not in a previous election, you can't be in the next one. You have to be signed up in the first one. You're basically a nobody. And then the next one, you can have like a primary and like get your name out there or whatever. And so it really, pops the balloon for anybody who's thinking of doing an independent party. And the problem here is, I think America definitely should have a Catholic party. And I think that is actually a realistic avenue of evangelization. Not in the way that the party will like convert people directly, but when you have those really diehard Protestants, for example, and they see like the church, like the Catholic Party, and they engage with the Catholic Party, like people are going to like there's going to be some rubbing off, and we're going to have a positive effect on them. And the same thing with the left. Like we're going to show like, no, like your like if we have this party that I'm dreaming of, obviously it's a dream. It's a pipe dream right now. But it's like you're going to have this actualization of a party that says, hey, we believe in this and we follow this. You can't trust the other guys. Because we can actually cite to you like why we believe what we believe. and where we get these arguments from. And it's not simply because the other guys aren't doing it or because the other guys are doing it. And so the fact that line of thinking is like so straightforward. And I think for a lot of people, it would be a breath of fresh air. Even for Protestants. And because like right now we just have crap. Like we always have crap. And ever since I've been alive, like we've always voted for the lesser of two evils. The problem is that now it's like there's a huge difference in candidates. So yep, and if you're a Republican first and a Catholic second, you're doing it wrong. You absolutely cannot do it that way. But that's also part of the problem why we don't have as much oomph in politics because you have like the liberals, like they think it's like they act it out as if it's like their religion. Not obviously not all the liberals, but the diehards, right? And like they're able to push through that because they treat it like their religion. All right, so yeah, but Americanism. So like Americanism is the like it's all right. This is not all right. I think that's getting a little bit too deep in the woods. Yes, I would completely agree with you, and it would make sense when you look at Martin Luther and the influence the German princes had, and then quite literally the King of England. Like, politics is like it was at the forefront of the Protestant revolt. So, let's see. Let's start. Okay, I am not going to share that, Olive. So I'm just going to let you know. I think it does kind of cross a line that I definitely do not want to cross. Yeah, it's pretty intense, Olive. So just okay. So yeah, all right. So I think that's it. I'm gonna stop my rambling. But if you want to look up the American heresy known as Americanism, please do so. There's several resources out there to do that. But remember to keep the second commandment and the first one, love your God with all your heart, body, and soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. So, and that's really what we need right now. I mean, we always need that. Like, that's the thing is we always need that. But like, we need people to actually do that and not just simply say they do that. So, so yeah, Olive, it's more like the comment itself that you had. It was a little extreme. But that's okay. Like I got rid of it, but it's fine. So okay, I will let you guys go. Thank you for being with me on the Monday. Hopefully you guys have already voted or will vote tomorrow, and I'll see you on the other side.